Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have with us Brian Dyer, who's an award-winning business owner and author of The Business Beast. Brian, welcome to the program.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Hey, you're welcome. Yeah, I'm excited to talk with you about your views on business, talk about your book. Of course, anytime that someone writes a book, it tells you that you've paid your dues, learned your lessons, got your scars, and figured out some strategy and solutions, and now you want to bring it to the world. But before we dive into that, give us a little bit of your entrepreneurial journey up to this point in your career.
Sure. Yeah. The entrepreneurial story that I've lived is pretty much the reason for the book. About 9 years ago, I was hired as the CFO for a small manufacturing company, and shortly afterwards also became the COO. The company wasn't growing, and so I wanted to grow. And so in developing a plan for the company's growth, I earned my way into an equity position in that company. But then I also started a second company at the same time. And so, I started down that journey a little while ago. It seems so fast at this point, but was really excited about the opportunity to grow kind of my own business, and it's done really well. Won a few awards, and even till this day, I'm still running that company. And I actually wrote the book while I was growing that company, and so there's kind of a unique element to that. It's kind of from the trenches, and has some lessons that I learned, along the way.
It's interesting you say that, because just this week I was listening to a podcast, because as a podcaster, I also listen to podcasts and stay up on trends in marketing. And this one person, and I forget who said this, but they were commenting on the fact that, hey, you can have your podcast interviews and your podcast for a lot of reasons, but many times if you can peel back the onion and see what are some other ways you can use a podcast for, or what are some other ways you can teach your audience. Well, one of the ways that they were talking about is working in real time. And it's kind of like if Brian Dyer wanted to launch a coaching program, a course, a master class, don't build it all and then try to sell it. Tell the concept of it up front, and then let people watch you in real time, kind of like, hey, here's chapter 1, I'm building this out and I'm talking about this, and here's what I'm seeing and here's what I'm researching. And so that's what you did with the book. You wrote it while you were growing the business, and I'll bet there were some great applications of, hey, here, I'm doing this right now, let me put this in the chapter.
Yeah, absolutely. That's an interesting point that you make, because one of the I never really set out to be an author, and so just even as you mentioned that was one of the other interesting ideas, just seeing some of the ways people provide content, and on podcasts, and that is kind of a fascinating thing. At one point I did wonder what it would be like to have, whether it was a vlog or a podcast that was kind of live while operating a business. When I was writing the book, when I started writing it, it was kind of just a daily journaling process that I started with, where I was waking up really early in the morning and kind of in that stillness, getting really clear on what was needed next for the growth of the business and things like that. Some of those things are in the book, just on personal processes I put in place to, become efficient and productive. But, it became such a long list after, years of writing these, that those lessons, those daily lessons that are really raw, kind of ended up transforming into this book that I ended up writing.
Yeah, I think that it's just such a real-time lessons and how they apply. And for instance, I will I have taught for 10 plus years marketing at 4 universities, and it's so neat to be able to say in a discussion forum, hey guys, this topic we're talking about here, with target audience, let's say, this is the academic concept we're talking about here. Let me tell you how I'm implementing this in my client's business right now. Last week we did, and then I can say to clients, oh, hey, about target marketing there, let me tell you why I'm recommending this. I teach this in class. It's an academic concept called, right? So I think that you're exactly right. You start when you can pull back just a little bit, like Michael Gerber teaches in his book, The E-Myth, take time to work on your business, not in your business. And if your nose is to the grindstone and you're too close to the business, many times you're not going to learn those lessons. So when you can take that step back and get up early and kind of go, okay, what's going on this week, this month in my business that are principles, and start honing them down and like putting them into, thought processes. Why not put it in a book? Why not, create that, masterclass? Why not create, all of those? So I think that's a really cool way to teach.
I'm glad to hear the ways you're kind of in a similar way when you're talking about teaching in classes. I think there's something to the time between a challenge and a solution and an issue, the details that matter that are in that moment that as time kind of marches on, some of those details get a little bit lost. And so, that's interesting to hear on your side, because I think that's where some of the magic that I've felt, mattered was, some of those details kind of get lost. And even as you tell a story from the past, some things that are really helpful to people that are in those moments, can sometimes get, lost. And so, I was kind of, when I was writing it, I didn't know I was growing a business that was going to win these awards and be so successful. I was just writing it, not knowing. And so to have been successful at the same time, and seen the success, to have those kind of raw moments at those times, it's been great to kind of have those and have those details to kind of utilize in helping others who are living those moments today.
Yeah, 100%. Hey, so I'm looking at the table of contents to your book, and something jumps out at me. Under instinct number 3, attack mode, one of the chapters is ignite your action instinct. So talk a little bit about that, because I really feel that too many times people are like, let me learn this and go to this seminar and read this book and do this thing. But in reality, you never implement it into your business to improve your business. So what do you recommend someone do to make sure that you take what you know and learn and actually put it into action and kind of ignite that and get it going?
I think action is the biggest differentiator. I think sometimes motivational things and things that click and things that make sense, sometimes we can feel motivated, and that feeling that we have of like being motivated to do something is actually, it's double-edged sword, because it can ignite you into an action where you can see what you need to do as your next step, but it can also make you feel productive, and there's a danger in that. Like, you may not know you're feeling that way, but there's something to kind of that feeling motivated. And I think a lot of people can kind of move on to that, like that next motivational thing. That's exciting. That's interesting and motivating. That's interesting and motivating. On a daily basis, I'll listen to podcasts. I'll listen to things that, over the years that I've grown this company, it's one of the things that I kind of mentioned, but I will drive in silence. So on my commute, for example, I will listen to either a book on tape or a podcast, something that's kind of in the field that I'm working, to kind of get ideas. And the second half of my commute is complete silence and focused on application. What am I going to do today to apply that in my world? And I think if you can scope, it's easy to overcomplicate and think of, the perfect plan. But if you can just start, if you can apply, application is just, for me personally, been instrumental in the success that I've found. And I feel like I've pulled forward results, from the future much earlier on the timeline from just applying today. I think a lot of the learning that you actually make is in the acting. Yep. So if you try today, you're going to find out some things that you wouldn't have been aware of. Even if you developed the perfect plan, it wouldn't have included these things that you learned from doing something about it today. And so the focus on today and, still be out there, curious about, things that help you improve, but then get real about application, create some silence in your world to think about what you're actually going to do to apply the knowledge and the things that are your mind's, making sense of.
The old phrase, knowledge is power.
Uh-huh.
So I say this so many times, and I love quotes as well as, these common things you hear in business and life quotes, and then you look at it from a different angle. And you've probably heard this before, but it's like, knowledge is not power. Knowledge is potential power, because you have to put it into action to become the power. Because these days at our fingertips, we've got access to as much knowledge that we possibly could ever have with Google and Alexa and all these things. So there's knowledge at our fingertips. But what are you going to do with it? And I'll tell you I guarantee you this. I know you do consulting. If we were to take every morsel of consulting knowledge that you put into your clients and say, oh, here are the key points, I could point to, oh, well, that's here online at this Google search, and that's here. But the problem is, even though it's at people's fingertips, they don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to apply it to their life and their business. And so that I want to make that point, as well as when we were talking about this, you listen to a podcast and then you take time to be quiet. I know Bill Gates is known for this, that even now to this day, he still takes like 1 week a year and goes out into a cabin in the woods or someplace and doesn't take computer, doesn't take phone, and just sits there and thinks and plans and writes and thinks of all the things that he's been going through. I think that's such a uncharted opportunity that people in our busy world don't take advantage of.
I think it's super powerful. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I've actually, that's the first time I'm hearing of him doing that. But it doesn't surprise me, because I've found so much better focuses from those moments of seeing the challenges that you have and just sitting. And it's almost like in that moment you're almost playing chess in the world that you're in. You can make these moves and you can like play out scenarios of like, okay, well, if I do this, then, what are the consequences? And you can kind of think through that. And, if we were computers, maybe we could just fast forward through all those things, but some of that takes us, a little bit of time to think through, and we can really filter out, we all have the same amount of time. We all have the same exact amount of time every day, and it's really important to be working on the stuff that matters to you. And so as you have those moments to kind of play those scenarios, you can really see opportunities to spend your time on things that are going to be more productive and put you on the path, further down the path that you're trying to get down. And, for me, that's interesting to take like a whole week like that. For me, it's been a process of finding that time every day, every work day at the beginning of the day, to see those paths and those things that matter. I've felt like my landscape changes so often that daily check-in really lets me like take into account the stuff that didn't go according to plan the previous day and recreate that same kind of mentality and focus on a daily basis.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, so what kind of consulting do you do when you work with clients?
So I work with either owners or leaders in companies who are running a company. Someone who's actively engaged in growing a business. It's usually, an entrepreneur has started something and they're looking at growing it, whether it's them individually, and they're moving towards a team of people. There's dynamics that once you start adding people to your team, you're now responsible, and now you have to also be, an owner for the work of your team. And there's tools and processes that are just critical to make sure that what's going on in the business, that the team knows what the score is on a daily basis. And so I work hand in hand with leaders or owners who are, probably under 200 people in employees, but over a few, and are trying to figure out what to do on a daily basis to grow to pull the success that they're looking for forward from the horizon, and closer to them in reality.
Because sometimes you're too close to the forest to see the trees, and you might be, the business owner or CEO that goes, we're doing good, or we need to do better, but I don't know where. Well, sometimes it takes that outside perspective. Absolutely.
I think, whether it's me or somebody else, I think it's super critical for you to be able to to have a sounding board, to have somebody who you're talking to that, isn't, necessarily a direct report, but somebody who, may be able to point out blind spots. We all have them. We all have blind spots. And so, it's been super helpful for me just with, business partners and, I guess it has been at times, coworkers, but I really appreciate, how helpful it's been to have people who are around you who can point out blind spots, bring up ideas, someone who can help you evolve the things that you currently see and provide another perspective to it. And so I just love doing it. I mean, honestly, it's one of the greatest just things that I've done, is just kind of seeing people who are living in a world that you have been in, and to just have that back and forth of evolving better ideas, but also focusing on application, just like we were talking about before, is like, what are we actually going to do about it today, scoping it down and seeing the results that come from almost that experiment of like focusing on action and acting and actually doing something today about getting better.
100%. And also, let's factor in this aspect too. Let's say that a CEO says, Brian, come in, we're an open book, open checkbook, I'll pay you whatever, just guide us, Obi-Wan Kenobi, your only hope, right? And you're like, okay, cool. And you just dump all these ideas on them, and they start implementing, but at some point they shut down because it's too much too fast. So you will need to be that person who's the external guide to know where they should be going and talk about that transformation. And the transportation, the steps and the action steps they need to take are going to be sequentially laid out for them so that they fully get each step along the way and don't get confused or overwhelmed. That's a big piece, because I know for me, I have seen like marketing courses that are like, oh my word, that would be so great, I need to learn this stuff. And then it says, and you'll get all of this. And then it's like bonus and bonus and bonus. And I'm like, done. No. I don't have the time for all that. You know what I'm saying? So what do you do to make sure that your advice is implemented but not overwhelmed?
That's a great point. I think, my experience in consulting too is, it's interesting to be talking about that word, just because my experience has been that, working with consultants that, they'll come in. Really, you can go into any place of business and you can see an opportunity to get better. But the magic is in the action of actually changing it. And so we had a consultant that came in at one point, and they saw a screw on our manufacturing floor, and they picked it up, and they looked at it and they said, there's a story of how this screw got here, and it points to a lot of the issues that you have, and I'm summarizing it, but then, they left, and just like, they had pointed out an issue, but then kind of left us to kind of like figure out what to do about it. I love being involved through the action. So The ideas, I think that you could spend the rest of your life creating ideas that could make your company better. You've got to scope it down into an actionable timeline. It may not be today. I love today. It may be tomorrow, but tomorrow's a dangerous word. And so, having ideas, but taking a chunk, even, you can have a larger plan, but there is something on that plan that you can scope down to an actionable step today. And I like the people that I work with feeling that I'm there with them, because I feel like too often, someone can give you an idea and then they're just, hey, let me know if you have any questions. But like, there's something about being in the trenches and feeling like, you're fighting these battles on a daily basis, and then you have a partner there with you. Do you have someone there who's going to point out, something that's coming over the horizon and that you're not seeing? And you're not going to see it if you're not staying engaged and involved. And so I really enjoy, filtering down those processes, the priorities. And there's a process to it, because all ideas aren't created equal. There are more impactful ideas. And so spending time with those that I work with, filtering through the ideas, but scoping it down into something that we can do, and that I'm there with them through it. That's kind of my process through them. And it's each one is kind of a custom solution, because everyone's living in a different world and their challenges are different. There's some theories that apply, but the specifics matter, and the specifics are different because we're all in different worlds.
I love it. Well, Brian, if someone is listening to this going, I need your help turning my business into a beast, or becoming a business beast, or maybe just picking up a copy of the book, what's the best way they can reach out and learn more about your book and your consulting?
Sure. Yeah. You can reach me at dyerwork.com, DYER work.com. There's a link to my book, and also you can contact me. And, like I said, I really appreciate these conversations. I enjoy them. So like, I'm happy to talk to anyone about their specific person. It's on me. No charge for that. If it makes sense to work together, I'd love to work together, but you can find me there, and I'd love to chat.
Excellent. Well, Brian, thanks so much for coming on today. It was a real pleasure talking with you.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate the conversation.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show, or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.